If you had a microscope and could look at a piece of a leaf, you would see thousands of tiny openings which branch out until the leaf has all of the materials it needs. What happens now?
All right, everyone, we're going to go through what is going to be a crash course on Illustrator and Photoshop. And we're going to be building this Adventure Awaits logo scene you can see here. First starting out in Illustrator, and then we're going to do a slightly different style over in Photoshop. So let's get started with building this. All right, now we are going to start out in Illustrator for this lesson. And the first thing that I'm actually going to mention is I am doing none of this using my mouse. I am using this Wacom tablet. This is a little bit older of one. It's an Intuos. I believe that they call these the Intuos Pro now. This is a small model, and it comes with this pen, and this makes it 1,000 times easier to draw. We will link to this for you in the Resources tab if you want to check out these different drawing tablets. Now, let's get on to the meat of the lesson and actually learn how to create something in Illustrator. So, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use that film and video preset that Noel was talking about in the main lesson. Now we want to use this HDTV 1080, which is the 1920 by 1080 preset, pretty standard these days. And I'm just going to create this document as it is. So 1920, 1080, RGB color, it'll be 72 ppi by default because it knows that we're doing a screen. Now, if you look at this, this is kind of not so awesome to draw on because we have this transparent background that's really obnoxious to look at. And then we've got like all of these marks and lines and stuff. So we're not going to just use this default setting here. What we're going to do is we will go back to this new document window here. And we are going to go over to our 1920 1080 film, which I just used it, so since it's a recent item, it'll show up here. And I'm also going to go into this More Settings dialog box. And there is an option here for the transparency grid. And I want to turn this off. And if I hit Create Document Now, you can see at least we're on a white board, so we can see what's going on here. Now in Illustrator, you work on what's called an artboard. And that is this black bounding box. And this is very important because this is the edge of our frame, this 1920 by 1080. You can actually draw beyond this, and After Effects will pick it up if you import this as composition retain layer sizes, but you're going to want to know that this is the edge of your frame for 1920 by 1080. So what's all this other green stuff going on here? Why do I need that? You probably don't, and you're going to want to get rid of it, right? So to get rid of that, we need to go to this little box here. It's the artboard tool. And you can see this is the bounding box for our artboard. If you so desired to make your artboard bigger or smaller, you can grab this, drag it around. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to hit Command-Z. And up here we have these 3 switches. So this is all this green stuff. So if we turn this one off, it gets rid of that center mark. If we turn this one off, it gets rid of the crosshairs. And this last section is that title action safe, which you probably won't need to worry about either, so we can turn off our video safe areas. And now we have just a nice, clean, white surface to work with. So the next thing that we're going to do is we are actually going to exit this artboard tool by hitting V, and that will bring us into our selection tool. And now we are going to make a background for our mountains to sit on. So what you want to do is you're going to hit M, which brings up the rectangle tool. Why it's M? I don't know. It was probably just what they had left over, and R was taken by rotation. So we're going to hit M, and you can click and drag all the way across your artboard. You don't have to be perfect, and I'm going to show you why in a second. So we have our nice big rectangle here. And what happens in Illustrator when you make a shape by default is you get 2 different kinds of colors. You get a fill and you get this, which is a stroke. So the stroke is going to be on this outside. You can see right there, that is our stroke. That is not the edge of the artboard. And we don't really need the stroke in this instance. So I am going to turn the stroke off by hitting none. And I'm going to go back to my fill color. And I'm just going to pick out kind of like a pleasant blue. I actually have this color popped up over here. You can find that under Window and Color if you want to have this open. So I can just kind of drag it around until I get a blue color that I like. Or I can come over to this swatch for the fill color, and I can double click on that. And this gives me the color picker that you're probably a little bit more used to. So you can really get in here and refine stuff, drag it around, get exactly the color that you are looking for. So I'm going to go with a little more gray in this color. And I want this to be exactly 1920 by 1080. Now, to do that without really getting in there and fiddling around and dragging stuff, I want to use these options up here. You can see this is the rectangle width, and this would be the height. Now, if this link here is turned on, that will constrain the width and height proportions. So that means that if I type in 1920 in this spot, it made it a little bit smaller on the actual width as well. I don't want that. I need to be precise here, so I'm going to type in 1080 and hit enter, and now I'm at least the right size. But you can see I'm not perfectly centered up here. I'm kind of hanging off the artboard a little bit. I don't want that either. So what I need to do is go and hit this transform button up here, and the center point on a 1920 by 1080 composition is going to be 960 by 540. So 960 on the X, 540 on the Y. And you can see that lined it up perfectly centered in our well, not really our composition, but on our artboard. So the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to come in here on my layers palette, which is very important. You're going to want this popped open pretty much the whole time that you're working. And you can just lock off this background. And I'm going to double click on this to rename it BKG, so I know that that's my background shape. So let's actually build our mountains now. Now this is where stuff gets fun, and we actually get to create things in Illustrator that are a little more complicated than just a rectangle. But we are going to start out with a rectangle. So we're going to hit that M key again, and I'm just going to draw myself a rectangle. I'm going to just give myself however big of a base I want here. And I obviously don't want this to be blue. So I'm going to come over here, double click this, and I'm going to get myself kind of a nice gray blue color. I'm going to hit OK. Maybe I don't like that color. It's a little too gray blue. I have time to be picky. I can be picky if I want. All right. Okay, we're going to say I like that color a little bit better. So what I want to do here is I'm going to hit P for the pen tool, and the way that Illustrator works is it makes paths to make shapes. So this is a closed path, much like that math path that Noel was talking about in the lesson today. It's that same kind of principle. So I want to make a triangle, and the easiest way to do that is to start out by making this rectangle, and then you come and see where it's got that little plus. I'm going to just tap it, and that's added another point onto my rectangle here. So now what I want to do is I want to get rid of this point and this point. And there's two ways I can do that. I can literally just hover over and you see it switches to a minus, and I can tap it, or I can use another tool called the direct selection tool, and that is activated by hitting the A key, and I can come in and grab any just single point that I want, and I can move it around, drag it in, whatever I want to do with it, which is different than the V key, which selects the entire path and moves it around. So I'm going to go back into that direct selection tool, and I'm going to grab this one path, and I'm just going to hit the delete key. And there we go. We've got a triangle, and it's all closed off. If you ever want to just check to make sure that your path is one continuous shape, you can go hit Command Y, and you can see, uh-oh, I deleted something funny, and my path is not a complete shape anymore. So I need to close this path off. The easiest way to do that is I'm just going to select my entire path. I'm going to go up to Object, Path, and then Join, which is also Command J, and you can see that made it close off, and now we have a complete shape again, which is what we want. Perfect. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to say round off these corners a little bit because I don't want them to be totally pointy. So what I can do is just grab each of the points using my direct selection tool, which again is A. I'm going to hold Shift to multi-select these different points. And then Illustrator in more recent editions has given us this option here, which is this little dot. And what this does is it rounds out that Bezier point very, very easily. It used to be you'd have to go in and kind of fiddle around with stuff. So this is a quick and easy way to round out these points. So I'm just going to drag it into whatever like height I want. We'll say that's good. So it's not quite as sharp. And now we have our nice rounded out rectangle. Rounded out. Now we have our nice rounded out triangle. It started as a rectangle, right? Okay. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to put some snow on these mountains because mountains have snow on them, right? So what we do is we hit our M key again. This may not seem like it'll work, but I promise you it will. And we're going to draw a rectangle. And I'm going to color that rectangle a different color like snow. And then I am going to use the V key, my regular select tool. I'm going to select both that and this triangle. And I'm going to go up to Window. And I'm going to find my Pathfinder. Pathfinder is a very powerful tool in Illustrator. It is a huge time saver, and I encourage you all to get in there and play with this tool, but we're going to use one specific option on this tool today, and that is going to be the Divide tool. So I'm going to hit Divide, and it doesn't look like it did anything out here except for now this point goes through. And if you look over here, it made this group. So what's going on with this group is we've got our point, which is closed off at the bottom, and we've got this outside path, and then we've got the mountain bottom. So what it's done is it's literally divided this into 3 different shapes. So I can just come in, I can grab that shape and just get rid of it. I could have also hit the delete key, but this is another way by clicking and dragging things into the delete bucket to get rid of them. So now you can see we've got our mountain with its snow on top. Now if you remember in the logo we had 3 mountains. Now we could go through all those steps again, or we could do this the easy way, and I would prefer the easy way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this whole group. As a quick aside, if you want to ungroup something, you can hit Command, Shift, and G, and that will ungroup it. To regroup something, you will hit Command G. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit the Alt key. And you can see there are 2 little arrows that pop up there. And if I grab an object that I have selected with that Alt key held down, and I drag it over, I'm going to hold Shift to constrain it to keep it lined up at the bottom and the top. I have 2 mountains now. So that was a super easy way to get a duplicate object. And now I want this mountain to be a little bit smaller, so I'm going to hold Shift again, and I'm just going to grab one of these points, and I'm going to drag it down so this is a little bit smaller. And then we're just going to repeat that process. I'll grab my big mountain, Alt-Shift. You have to start dragging before you hit Shift, or it won't work. And then I'm going to hit Shift again and just bring this down a little bit. So we have 3 different mountain heights. Very nice. Now, what I don't like about this is that all 3 of these are the same color, so they all kind of just blend together and mush together, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, I'm going to use A, my direct select. I'm going to click on this mountain, and I'm going to click on the Shift click on this one, and I will come over to my swatches. Well, my color picker in my little swatch, I should say. And Illustrator does not real-time update this. I wish it did. Maybe in future versions it will, but as of right now, you just kind of have to base it off of this swatch here. You won't see your artwork update. So I'm going to say I like that color. And now we have some nice depth to our mountains. Now, I am going to tell you a little bit about how After Effects is going to handle this file before we move on. So Noel had mentioned that you need to have stuff in layers to bring it over into After Effects. Well, Photoshop treats it one way and Illustrator treats it a completely different way. And it's actually sometimes a little annoying, but once you understand it, it's not so bad. So Illustrator artwork, when it's imported into After Effects, After Effects will only look at this top layer here. So all of the stuff below it, no matter how you import it, composition, retain layer sizes, anything, it will not bring in anything nested below this layer. So what I want to do is I am going to select this layer. I'm going to come up here to this little switch thing, and I'm going to go Release to Layers Sequence. And just like that has popped every single one of those groups into its own layer. So now I can come in, I can grab the top one, Shift Select. It's being picky. Come on now. Shift Select to this bottom one. And I can drag all of these out. There we go. We can drag all of them out into their own individual layers. I will get rid of the layer 1 here. And these will all be read in to After Effects as individual layers now. So now when you import stuff, you can actually animate it. So that's the whole point of being in After Effects, is to animate things. So the next thing that we wanted to do with our logo is, actually I'm going to come in, I'm going to grab all of these guys really quick, except for my background, that's actually still locked off. And I'm going to center this up a bit better. So I can do that by shift selecting all of these using this click to target little circly guy here. And I am going to come over to the transform properties and we will just type in 960 by 540, and that centers it up in the middle of our artboard. So now let's add our sun in. So we had that nice yellow sun back here, and to do that we are going to hit the L key. If you want to explore the different shapes that Illustrator has available to you, you can just hold down on this and you can see we've got rectangles, rounded rectangles, ellipses, polygons, etc. We're going to use our ellipse tool, which is the L. And this time I want to draw the shape from the middle point of the actual shape. So I'm going to hold down Alt while I'm dragging, and I don't want it to be smushed like that, so I'll hold Shift, and that'll snap it into a nice round circle. Now this is above everything, and it's also not on its own independent layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. Sometimes my Wacom pen thinks that it's double-clicking things, so if you see a dialog box pop up, that's just kind of what it does. But I may as well name this while I'm here, so I will name this Sun. And I'm going to come in, I'm going to grab my ellipse, and I'm going to drag it onto its own layer. Wonderful. And let's give this a nice sun color. These are the default swatches that Illustrator has available to us. So I'm just going to grab this orange swatch because I actually like this color. It's kind of nice for a sun. Looks like it's setting behind the mountains. And I do not want this at the top, obviously. So I'm just going to drag this layer in between 4 and 5. So it's still above the background, but below the mountains. Now I want to add that second ring to this. And for this, I'm actually going to open this up. And I'm going to do something sneaky. I'm going to hold Alt, and I'm going to hit one of the arrow keys. And you can see that popped up another ellipse, and if you were looking really close, it moved it up 1 pixel. So I'm just going to move it back down 1 pixel. And what that did is it just is a quick way to make a duplicate copy of something without having to use that Alt drag technique that I showed you earlier. It just pops the new one in by moving it a pixel in whatever arrow key direction you actually picked. So now I can easily make another second kind of sun here. I'm going to use Alt and Shift. At the same time I'm scaling it up. And this time I don't want this to have a fill. I actually want it to have a stroke. So I can come over here and hit this little swap arrow, and it makes for me a stroke. Now if I want this stroke to be a little bit thicker, there is a stroke option up here. And I can go up or down in size. And you can also type it in manually if you want. And there you go. We have that nice ring around our sun now to just give it a little bit of extra pizzazz. Now, I don't like how high up the sun is right now, so I'm just going to grab these two, and I'm just going to nudge them down using the arrow keys. Looks like our sun is slowly setting here. And that's a little bit closer to where I want it to be. So we've got our sun. I'm not going to separate out the ring and the sun itself. I'll just assume that I want to animate those together. Now, the last thing that we needed to do was actually add in some type to this. So I am going to go to the top again. I'm going to create a new layer, pops the layer up above, and I'm going to hit the T key, and that brings up our type. And I'm just going to touch onto the artboard, and you can see really tiny, we got some lorem ipsum. That's a newer feature in Illustrator where it'll pop in this kind of default lorem ipsum type so you can see what's going on with your type right away. Because it used to be you might hit the type thing on accident and you would end up with all these weird empty type layers in your actual artwork, which is a little bit unpleasant. So this is a little bit easier to track them in case you do that. So what we want to do here is we want this bigger, obviously. I mean, 12 points a little bit tiny. So I'm going to start, well, say 48. We'll go a little bigger, 72. You can also use the buttons again if you want. And let's actually change this from lorem ipsum to adventure awaits. Very nice. And I can actually center this type by using this paragraph option here, which scooted it all the way over. But if you look at the actual bounding box to it, which it is centered now. Alright, so now I've got this kind of in the middle, and you can see when I actually drag stuff around, there's these little flickers of lines and stuff, and what those are smart guides. Smart guides are really cool and useful. They make it very easy for you to line stuff up with like center lines, or sometimes even if you're spacing things vertically or horizontally, they help out. So you'll see those flickering every once in a while, and that's exactly what those are. It's a normal feature to Illustrator. If they happen to drive you nuts, you can turn them off by going up to View and Smart Guides, and that will turn them off. But I prefer to leave them on. So back to our type, I'm going to hit the T key again. Alright, so I am going to highlight this type here, and I'm going to find a typeface that I like. Because I've already made the demo of this, I know that I like Museo, which is available through Adobe Typekit, which comes with your Creative Cloud subscription, so you can easily grab this typeface. And I am going to do Museo 300. And actually, you know what? In this one, maybe I'll do like a 500. It's a little bit heavier, not bad. I'm going to just kind of tighten up that AW pair there. Using the Alt key. I can nudge letter spaces together. That's called kerning. If something looks like it's really, really spaced out, far away from each other, you can tighten that spacing up, or even, make it a little bit bigger by holding Alt and then using your arrow keys to nudge the individual letters around. That's kind of a little typography pro tip for you guys. And I want to change the color of this type now. Now, to get out of type mode, you cannot hit V to go back to your regular selection tool because that type's a V, and that's not what we want. So we need to actually go over and hit our direct selection tool, and you can change your type color just like you would normally with any other object in Illustrator. So, very nice. So now we have our type here. Now, if you look at this type, it is one layer, like one kind of unit in Illustrator. If you needed to separate your letters for some reason, like say you wanted to animate each letter individually or something, then you're actually going to have to outline this type. And to do that is under Type, Create Outlines, which is also Command-Shift-O. And you can see what that did is it actually outlined the type and it made a group with every single layer in it, and you could do that same thing that I did with the release to layers sequence, not build, because build does something completely different, and that will get all of your type on individual layers if you did need to bring in those individual layers or individual words or whatever it is into After Effects. So the last thing that we want to do is we want to be extra tidy with everything, and we want to come in and rename all of our layers so that we know what they are once we bring them into After Effects. So now that we've checked out how to build a vector style logo in Illustrator, we can jump on over to Photoshop and see how we can do something that's got a little bit more of a texture to it and looks more painterly than the clean vector style. Alright, so here we are in Photoshop, and what we want to do is basically the same thing we did last time with our preset. So we're going to go over to Film and Video, grab our HD TV 1080p, which is the 1920 by 1080 preset, at 72 ppi, and we don't actually need to do anything else like we did in Illustrator with any type of goofy settings, because this one is already set up and it's not going to do anything crazy with the background. The only thing you might want to do is possibly change, no, you don't even want to do that. Never mind. I lied. You don't want to fool with anything here. White's fine. Don't worry about it. Just hit create. And that makes our kind of, I guess you could think of this as an artboard here. This is our drawing surface here in Photoshop. So the first thing you're going to notice is it created this background layer. You cannot get rid of this thing until you create another layer. So let's make another layer really quick. And we can do that by hitting this button here. So now if you so choose to, you could get rid of this background layer by unlocking it and then just dropping it in the trash can. And now you have a transparent background if you wanted something transparent to actually work with instead of having that white background there. We could alternatively have changed the color of that background, which I will show you how to do right now. So this works the same way. Once that background layer was unlocked on any layer to fill it, we want our blue color. So I am going to grab a nice pleasing blue color, same kind of color picker situation we had over in Illustrator. And we'll say we like that color there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Alt key and I'm going to hit delete. And that fills this with our foreground color. Now there's a difference in Photoshop between foreground and background colors. And that is over here. This top one, foreground color. This bottom one, background color. To fill something with the background color, you can hit Command Delete and that will fill it with the background color. But in our case, we want Alt and Delete for that nice blue color. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make the mountain. Now I know what you're thinking. I have no artistic abilities. I can't draw. You're panicking. How do I make a mountain? I'm going to have to come in and do a brush and try and get this triangle. No, you don't have to do any of that. I promise. I'm going to make this super easy for you. So what we're going to do is something a little bit sneaky. We're going to create a new layer. Command Shift N, and that's going to give us a new layer and pop open this dialog box so that we can name it, and we're going to call this Mountain. And we can hit Enter, so there's our new layer for our mountain. And we are going to use one of the lasso tools. So we are going to come over and we are going to grab our polygonal lasso. And what this guy does is it makes nice straight lines. So we can come in and just tap where we want our top part of the mountain, tap down here, hold Shift to go straight across, tap here, and tap there to close it off. Now if I don't like the exact shape or height of that mountain, I can hit Command D to deselect, and I can come in and just try again real quick. And we'll say that I like that one better. Now because we want this to look a little bit hand-drawn, we don't have to be absolutely perfect with our mountain shape with this triangle. So now what I want to do is I'm going to come over here and I am going to give it a nice kind of dark gray blue color again, and I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to use that Alt Delete to fill in just the area that was selected. So now I can come in and hit Command D And now my selection, I have this little triangle, my selection's gone. We have this guy to kind of start with that we can very easily trace over with a brush. So you don't need to worry about being absolutely perfect with your brush skills. You have a template to work with. Now, if I don't like the position of this mountain, I can move it around by hitting the V key, which brings up our transform tool, and we can drag this guy around to move him. So I want to get a brush out now, which is usually if you're going to be in Photoshop, you don't want this clean vector looking stuff. You want something a little bit of dirt and grunge or texture to it. And that's where Photoshop really shines. Now, Photoshop is an incredibly, incredibly deep program. And I promise there are other ways to do this in this program than what I'm about to show you today. But this is just an easy way for you to get started with these tools in Photoshop. So we are going to grab a brush tool, which is B, or you can find it over here on your palette thing. And we are going to, this is right here is where you can look at all the different brushes. So Photoshop has some preset brushes in it. These are all pretty standard. You can grab this one here. It's a little bit small, but you can change the size by, messing with this guy. We can just test that really quick. And you notice my brush stroke here. It does something really nice. It tapers at the end. And that is because I have the fancy tablet. This is where this thing really shines, is in Photoshop when you're doing something more painterly. Photoshop tablet, absolute awesome. Highly would recommend this. So what's going on is there's this pressure sensitivity button up here, because if I turn this off, you can see I get a uniform stroke, and that's how it's going to look if you use a mouse, which totally cool. You can get away with using the mouse in this. The other thing I'm going to mention is I have to go back a couple times in history right now. So if you hit Command Z once, or just Command Z, it's going to get rid of one thing. If I hit it again, it came back, which is not the way that most Adobe programs work, but Photoshop works this way. So you're going to want to do Command Z for the first step back in your history, then Command Alt Z, and that will take you back further into the history. Alright, so I'm going to say that I like this brush, and I'm going to come in with my mountain here. I'm going to hit B. No layers are selected. I need to select my layer. And I can just get in here. I'm going to zoom in, Command plus. That works the same way in Illustrator if you need to zoom in. Command plus and Command minus still work. Standard Adobe stuff right there. And I'm just going to give myself a little bit of a texture just by tracing this kind of edge of the mountain here. And maybe I decide I hate this brush. So I can go back in time. And I can try a different brush really quick. There we go. And maybe that's a little bit too big, so I'm going to turn the size down. And this is a little bit of a fiddly process when you're kind of drawing stuff by hand. It doesn't matter if you have a tablet. I also have a drawing surface called a Cintiq, and I get to actually draw on the screen on that one. And it's a little bit easier, but I have to undo things even on that. So that's just a normal part of drawing and creating stuff, is you're going to have to hit that Command Z button. Alright, so I'm going to say that I am happy with the way our mountain looks. He's got a little more character to him than just like a normal vector look. So I want to get that snow on top of the mountain again, right? Now, the easiest way to do that is not to come in and try to draw the snow on above it. We want to create that template again, right? So I'm going to hit M, which brings up our selection tool. And in this case, though, it brought up the elliptical one. I don't want that one. If I would hit M again, it'll bring up a rectangular marquee tool. M is for marquee in this case. And we can just come over the top of our mountain and make, doesn't have to be a perfect selection because we built this on a separate layer. This is important. Had we built it on the background layer, this would not work, what I'm about to show you, because this, you can see, has this transparency checker in the back. So if I turn this off, separate layer, means it's transparent behind it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command X, and that cut the top off the mountain. And I'm going to hit Command Shift and V. And what that does is it will paste it in place. I'm going to go back. If I would hit a normal Command V, where'd the mountain go? Where'd the top go, right? It went right into the center of the art, which is not what we want. We want it back in its original location. So, Command Z, go back a couple steps. And where are we at in this process? Command X, Command Shift V. There we go. We are caught up now. So now we have our mountain top. But how do we change the color on this mountain top easily? This isn't like Illustrator, where we can just go in and come over to this swatch here and start changing stuff and actually have it update. It doesn't work the same way. So one easy way we can do this is we can come down to the effects. And we can put a color overlay on this guy. And you can see I can grab a color and I can come up here and turn it into that nice snow white we had before and hit OK. And that is an easy way to recolor something like this in Photoshop. So the next thing I want to do is, obviously we have a clean line here. We want to touch that up real quick. And I'm just going to hit the brush tool, zoom in a little bit, and give our snow a little bit more character there. Clean that up a little bit. There we go. Now we've got some snow on our mountaintop and it doesn't look, nice and clean at that edge there. So what we want to do next, I'll call this snow. Why not? We'll rename it. I just double clicked on that layer to bring up the little type box there to rename stuff. And what I'm going to do now is I am going to group these guys. So Shift select both of those, hit Command G, and we have made a group. We will call this mountain. And what I want to do is make 2 more mountains. Now I could, again, go through all of that and make them all completely unique, but I don't have the time for that because the client is over my shoulder and I need to get going on this project. So I am going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to grab this group, and now I have 2 mountains. I hit V, 2 mountains. I can hit Shift to bring it over, Command T to transform. This brings up the free transform dialog box, which means I can move it in all different directions. In my case, I want to hold Shift to constrain, and I want to scale it down. Now, one thing to remember when you're working with raster artwork, Photoshop has gotten better with this in the last few years, but whatever the largest size on this is, if you scale it up at a certain point, it will start getting pixely. So you want to work from the biggest object you have down. You want to make things bigger than they need to be to err on the side of caution if you think things may need to get scaled up at a certain point. Now, I don't want these two to look exactly the same, right? So I'm going to grab my mountain again, hit Command T. I'm going to right-click on this, and I'm going to flip it horizontally. And that changes it just so that it's a horizontal flip, and it makes it look a little bit different. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to do that same thing we did before. And I can actually do something a little sneaky with this, and I can hit Alt and the down arrow, and it makes yet another copy over in this layers palette. So now we have another mountain that's hiding out over here that I can move over. There he is. And I can move this guy into place, and I can hit Command T, and we can shrink him down just a little bit. You can use your arrow keys to move them around. Wonderful. So we have 2 mountains. You can come in and change the snow a little bit if you wanted it to be completely individualized. That's up to you, but I'm just going to keep forging ahead here. We want this back here again to be a slightly different color, so I will do that same thing I did. So this is our original big old mountain, and I'm going to grab our mountain, and I can either hit Command and I can select. I can get marching ants going by hitting Command well, holding Command and clicking on this, and we get our little marching ants going around our selection. And I can come in and do it this way, where, well, let's grab our eyedropper. So by default, if you're in this color picker in Photoshop, you'll get this eyedropper, so you can click on something, it'll bring you to that original color, and then you can kind of tweak it from there. And then I can use our Alt backspace to color this in if I want to, or if I wanted that additional control to play with things and see it in real time, I could also do that same thing that we did with the snow with that color overlay effect. So I will hit Command D, and now we have our mountain in our different colors, and it's looking pretty good, but we need our sun again. So let's have some fun with the sun, and we are going to make a new layer again, and we will bring up our ellipse marquee tool. Come here, ellipse marquee, and I'm going to hold down Alt to get this to grow from the center and shift just like we did in Illustrator to make a nice big circle. And I'm going to hit B for brush. I'm going to grab an orange color that I like. We'll say this orange. And I am just going to let's grab a different brush. Size 40, that's good. And then I'm just going to do this really quick, just scribble to get a nice texture going with that brush. And really quickly, I have something very cool looking that looks almost painterly. It does have a bit of a clean edge, which you could come in and kind of, fool around with and maybe add a little bit of more brushing to these edges if you wanted. And I want to move this below the mountains in layer order. So I'm going to hit Command, and I'm going to hit the left bracket key, and that will jump it down the layer order, or if I hit the right bracket key, it will move it up. Awesome. So now our sun is below the mountains, and while we're here, we'll just name this. If you double click on it a certain way, you will get the layer style box, not what I wanted. Like if you double click in this kind of gray area that's around the name, you have to be a little bit pickier with like actually clicking on the name. That's what brings up the layer styles. So we'll back out of there. And now, last but not least, we need our type. So again, it is the T key, same thing that we had in Illustrator. And this time though, you can see I don't actually get that lorem ipsum when I touch down. And actually what happened is I got this really tiny little box, which is not what I want. So we can get rid of our type layer. And let's try this again. We're going to hit T. And if we tap really quick, it'll bring up the cursor. What happened last time was it took it as a click and drag. So if I hit the T key, I can actually drag out a box for type. Like if you had a paragraph or something that you needed to put in here, that's how you would go about doing that. And this will actually get the type. Like if I start typing, it'll jump a line, right? So sometimes you might want that option. I don't at the moment. So one more time, touch down and adventure awaits. Adventure. All right, so adventure awaits. Now I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to come up here, and we can go up to 72 point, which is actually pretty good. And I like that it's on Futura, but if you needed to see other typeface options, you're going to need to go back into that type tool by hitting T after you move things around. And you can highlight it, and you can actually real-time preview by just scrolling over different typefaces. So I will stick with Futura in this case, but I don't like the orange. The orange is a little bit obnoxious for this. We want white. So we're going to change our type color to white. And maybe we don't want it pure white. We want just a little tiny bit off, so it's not like a blinding full-on white color. And we hit OK, and if I actually come up here, you can see we've got our adventure awaits type. So our Photoshop document is all ready to go into After Effects to be animated at this point. Pretty awesome. So now you know a bunch of stuff to really get you started in working with Illustrator and Photoshop, so you can either tweak the different project files that Noel is giving you in this class, or you can really get in here and start making art on your own, which is a lot of fun. So that's all I've got for you this time. Thanks for watching.
If you had a microscope and could look at a piece of a leaf, you would see thousands of tiny openings which branch out until the leaf has all of the materials it needs. What happens now?